Good afternoon. Welcome to this Brand Republic webcast in association with the Red Group. My name is Andy McCormick and I'm Deputy Editor of Marketing Magazine. Our topic today is multi-channel retail strategies and how we can do more to forge deeper connections with consumers. I'm delighted to welcome as my guests Andy Bridges, Data Quality and Supplier Manager at Loyalty Management Group, and Mark Roy, Chief Executive of the Red Group and Chair of the DMA Data Council. Andy and Mark are going to help me analyse the findings of the Red Group's report into multi-channel retail marketing. Throughout the webcast, I'd like to invite you all to submit questions to the panel. There will also be a series of poll questions, which I also encourage you to participate in. Finally, at the end of the webcast, if you could fill out our survey, it would help us enormously. Now, in a moment, I'm going to hand you over to Elise from the Red Group, who will take us through the initial findings. But first, I'd like to invite you all to participate in our first poll of the day. Our first poll question today is, are bricks and mortar retailers living on borrowed time? And now, over to you, Elise.
The first question that we asked our sample, which is a randomly selected sample of 1,524 UK consumers, was how often is the information... Oh, I'm sorry, my apologies. How likely are you to purchase the following goods in store? We asked this about reading glasses, food, sofas, dinnerware, clothes, television, mobile phones, vacuum cleaners, and books and music. Clothes and technology and white goods all achieve figures of under 70%. Consumers are least likely to purchase books and music in store. Products that require a degree of sensory qualification sell better in store than online. The majority of consumers still prefer to purchase food in store despite supermarket efforts to drive online deliveries.
Excellent. Thanks for that, Elise. Andy, can I bring you in here? Why do you think there's such a big disparity between people buying some products online and not others?
Well, it's funny, we were discussing this earlier, actually, myself and Mark, and I still believe that people like the look and feel of some things. I think books and music online, you really know what you're getting. It's quite easy to buy those sort of products online. But people still like the look and feel of going into a shop and actually sensing the clothes or whatever they're buying. Especially, I think, with food as well. I was quite surprised by that stat. I thought more people would buy food online. But obviously not. People still, they buy a certain amount online and then they buy the rest at the weekend. And we were discussing this, Mark, earlier, weren't we?
Indeed. I don't think there's any huge surprises here. I think, effectively one... if you'd made an educated guess, you'd probably get that. I think there are some interesting ones. I agree around the food thing. The book and music, obviously, is the new iTunes culture that we live in, and certainly Amazon. And you'll see throughout the rest of this report that Amazon has done remarkably well, both in terms of the number of people who are engaging with the brand and engaging with the company, but also the way that they look after their customers. And I think as we progress the discussions, looking after your customers is really what it's about these days. These are the retailers that are really taking the world by storm. I think, the interesting about... I was surprised about the reading glasses, and I know the chap who runs Glasses Direct. And again, we were discussing this earlier on, but I feel slightly sorry for him that clearly nobody really wants to buy glasses online, although he seems to have built an effective kind of company around it. But I think that clearly people want this tactility. There's this innate desire to look at something and maybe feel it, and etc. And that seems to go through all the way through to the brands like food as well.
Excellent. Yeah, for me, it's a phenomenally large amount of people that wanted to buy certain products online. So I think we should move on to the next findings.
Following on from that question, we asked consumers how likely they were to purchase the same goods online. This obviously reinforces the previous slide's findings, and only 14% of consumers are most likely to buy food online. Women are far more likely to shop online for food than men. And books and music sweep the board with a massive 70% purchasing online.
Excellent. Thanks, Elise. Mark, why do you think the difference in gender? Why are women far more likely to shop online for food than men?
Well, they obviously don't live in my house. I have to tell you. I think that.
You were telling us earlier that you do the main
Well,
shopping
absolutely.
trips,
I mean, they say a change is as good as a rest. So well, that's what my wife tells me. But I think that clearly, I think. And again, if I take perhaps my own sort of personal experience of this, and certainly talking to my wife, the issue is that these days, women are increasingly busier, and actually, what the internet provides them, obviously, is efficiency. They're able to do a lot of the things that perhaps otherwise they would have to do manually. They can do it more efficiently online. Certainly, one of the things that we find in terms of online is actually, deliveries is very difficult, and I think that. Until they really resolve the issue of actually where you get something delivered to, then it's going to be more complicated going forward. I think the issue around music, I'm slightly concerned about the music thing, because I mean one assumes that absolutely everything is bought online. I wonder whether this is a sort of technological gap. I wonder whether actually because you can't yet, or the new technologies in terms of using MP3. Via your television or your stereo are still a little bit backward at the moment. I'm sure it'll change going forward, but I think at the moment then maybe I'm surprised really that only 70% of books and music is actually bought online, and people are still going out and even maybe buying vinyl. Maybe people are still buying vinyl. You never know.
Yeah, I think you're right, Mark. I think vinyl's almost, from what I've read, it's almost dead.
Yeah, quite.
It's surprisingly enough. But it would be interesting actually to add to this how book retailers and music retailers are actually performing. And I know I've read recently, I think HMV have had some problems due to people actually... easier to go on iTunes. It is easier to go on iTunes. And actually the wide variety of choice and being able to buy... one single rather than an album, which has almost taken that away from the high street
Waterston's
retailer.
doing well, isn't it? I think as an organisation, isn't Waterston's doing well? They're a bookseller, aren't they? So
There's definitely been some challenges with Waterston's, but
Right.
I think the trend has been for a lot of high street brands in that sector to struggle. But having said that, our poll results are just in, and it's really interesting to see that in answer to our bricks and mortar only retailers living on borrowed time, 75% say they are not on borrowed time. So what do you think of those results, chaps?
Well, I think they're absolutely right, personally. And I think actually to some degree as we go further into this research, we'll find that actually that's the view of consumers as well. It's very interesting. So it's initial at the beginning of this research and this sort of brief programme, it's good that the gut reaction, the knee-jerk reaction is, no, we're okay. It's challenging out there for people, quite clearly, and the research shows that too. But I'm delighted to hear that they feel that's the way, and I think this research will bear it out.
Yeah, that's interesting. I'd like to just see how that tact follows along as we go through this survey.
Indeed, well, 25% of people aren't sure, so there is a bit of doubt there. So hopefully some of our findings will shed some light on this further.
So the next question we asked was, how often is the information consumers receive from retailers appropriate and relevant? We found that only 6% of consumers consider marketing received to be relevant to them most of the time. Overall, it's actually 42%, the statistic, it's a typo here, but overall 42% think the information received from retailers is generally irrelevant and incorrectly targeted. And younger audiences report higher relevancy than older demographics.
Excellent. Okay, let's talk about the information received from retailers. Is it appropriate enough? Is it relevant enough? Andy?
Once again, we've been discussing this stat, and both myself and Mark have been in the DM trade for a number of years.
Well, you're an absolute expert in this exact topic, so I'd be really interested to see what you think of this.
Some of these stats really concern me.
Yeah.
We've done, or certainly I've done, and I know Mark's done a lot over the last few years to help the DM trade and almost give it back its name. It's a good medium. It's a good way of contacting people, but it has to be targeted. And it surprises me in this economic climate that companies are still sending misleading mail, and to me that's literally throwing money down the drain. Literally throwing, the amount of some of this mail that it actually costs to get that mail piece out of the door, you would be surprised that literally that's almost going in a bin. So very, very concerned about these stats, and I would only hope that we can do as much as we can for the trade to improve these.
I mean, I hope. I completely agree with what Andy says. I can only hope that had we done this survey a year ago, it would have been a worse figure. Because I think that the reality is there's an awful lot of people out there, and whether that be the DMA or organisations like ours, or indeed physical practitioners like Andy, who are putting stuff out there, who are taking great care in terms of the things that they're doing and making it relevant and correctly targeted. The reality is that we are on a journey, and we are on a journey to significantly improve and enhance the reputation of direct marketing as a whole. The interesting thing about that is, and I think one thing we need to be cognizant of in these discussions, and what we've seen recently, obviously, and a lot to do with the recession, is a huge upsurge in the number of digital communications. And I suspect that result is slightly tainted by the fact that an awful lot of, and I also include within that as well, because we're talking retail here, and retail use quite a lot of alternative communications, such as door drops and inserts and things like that, etc. So I think maybe, and one of the problems actually with defining direct and encompassing direct is that as these new opportunities and these new channels come in, they often are less regulated perhaps than the more traditional channels, e.g. what I would typically call direct mail, the background from which Andy and I originally come from. But we're now having to embrace the digital, and I think we're seeing a shift and a realisation that actually all of these new channels are under the same ROI pressures that direct mail ever was. And it's all very well that 20 years ago I was going out and saying, well, the wonderful thing about direct mail is that you can measure it and you can measure your return on investment. You know whether you've made money or not. Well, the same rules are now beginning to apply to the new channels that are coming, whether that happens to be mobile or SMS or digital or email communications. So I hope that actually if we had done this a year ago, it might have been 53, and I hope if we do it next year, it might be 33. The reality is, Andy is spot on. Everybody's just simply wasting money in doing this. If your punters think it's irrelevant, I hope it's not going in the bin, Andy. I hope they're recycling it at least, but something along those lines, because that's the other target from a DMA point of view we're working on at the moment. But I think I sincerely believe and hope that we're on a journey, and I hope that we're improving that, etc.
Is it, Andy, do you think the consumer seems to be getting a bit of a raw deal here? I mean, no one likes promotions that aren't relevant to them. I mean, do brands inherently need to think more about the consumer when they're devising their marketing strategies?
I think they do. I think, without being rude to marketeers, they are now realising that data is a key part of their side of the business. You can't. My belief is you can't run successful marketing without the core and the background of that data being there. Now marketers might say something completely differently, but that's an argument to have another time. But the core of it is you have to respect what the consumer wants, and it does come down to brand awareness. If you constantly bombard a consumer with correspondence from a brand that isn't relevant, then they will turn away from that brand, I'm sure. They don't want timely, relevant responses. And I think that's key. And I think also what's key is giving that to them within the time period that they've joined you or they join a brand. So almost that they feel that trust between themselves and that brand. And I don't know how you feel about that, Mark.
No, I think you're absolutely right. I think that there's a balance that has to be struck in terms of whether people do. I think interestingly, I've talked about this a lot historically, and I think that the issue is very true. I think being old as I am and realising that I went through the recession in the 1980s and indeed the 1990s and indeed this one. This recession is very different from any other recession in so much as I think what happened in previous ones is that people just cut the marketing spend. It was a great way of saving 5, 10, 20 million. The reality is now that the marketplace that these retailers are in, and actually other sectors as well, is that actually if you stop marketing, you will give up market share. And the reality is also if you market badly yeah. and you alienate your customer base or you alienate your prospect base, then the reality is they will march with their feet somewhere else, and they will, because the chances are that, you know, those, whether it be Nectar and the raft of great retailers that you've got working with you, if they lose faith with your supermarket brand at Nectar, e.g. Sainsbury's, they may go to another supermarket.
will, yeah.
The reality is that, you know, people these days have much more choice, and that choice is much more readily available. So one's ability to alienate, or indeed, as I like to call it, piss off your customers, which is what we're all trying not to do, you know, the reality is they will go somewhere else, and they will say, no, I've had it. You've had your chances. That's it. I'm out of here. So the relationship that we have is very much more fragile than perhaps it has been historically.
And it's earning, it's earning, it may sound like a pun, but it's earning that loyalty.
Oh, indeed.
And
Absolutely.
there doesn't seem to be...
And that comes from how you behave.
Exactly,
Yeah.
exactly.
I was just going to say, do you think that retail marketers actually have an even harder job than any other marketer in other sectors, in that there are so many more channels now than there once were, and they have to really kind of, the next couple of years, they're going to have to really kind of up their game to...
Well, I think that's a very interesting point. I rather than that specific point, I think that I agree with the point. Yes, they're going to have to work much harder. But you know what? The reality is the hardest thing of the whole lot for a traditional bricks and mortar retailer is when somebody walks in your shop. Because if you want to piss off your customers, that's the easy way to do it, isn't it? Don't go to them, but be too pushy. Everybody's very particular about that and so and so. So not only do you have to market yourselves really effectively, but the promise that you make in order to get the store traffic, by God, you then have to deliver when actually they arrive at your store, because if you don't... So actually, with digital communications in the shop, okay, you've got to get them to buy it, bits and pieces, etc., and then you've got to deliver it on time or whatever. So actually, I think the relationship, although more fragile, is actually much easier from a digital point of perspective, whereas the true one-to-one, e.g. I'm in your shop talking to you, that's the real one-to-one relationship, and maybe that's the real difficulty.
Yeah, I'd just like to add, as you say, I think it's once you've got that footfall through the door, it's how you treat them, and you treat them well as soon as they're through that door, because otherwise they will turn around and they'll walk out.
Mark, just finally on this one, do you think there's any relevance that younger demographics tend to find that promotions are better targeted to them than the older demographics? This isn't aimed at you for a reason.
Cheeky bugger. Right, okay. I think the issue potentially is that there was some very interesting research that actually came out of the US about a year ago, and we saw direct mail volumes going up significantly in the US. So obviously we were all going fantastic, and the reality was we then needed to find out why that was. And the reality was that sort of under 30-year-olds really had never lived in a world where they got direct mail, and there was a real desire, there was almost an aspiration to receive direct mail. And I think probably as a result of that, and I think that I'm sure the same is absolutely true here, I think the potential rejection rates, if you like, e.g., it's not specifically relevant, and clearly as you get older, you get more grouchy and more needy, and things must be just so. So as I'm an example of. So I think that maybe one becomes more discerning as you get older and less discerning. But I think at the moment there's a real desire, there's an aspiration within perhaps the under 30s, saying actually I've never had direct mail, I'd quite like to get it. And you know what? It's pretty good, some of it, that we put out and all the rest of it, etc., particularly when it's teamed with other channels and everything else.
Excellent. Just a couple of comments from the audience. Ella says, vinyl has made a comeback, especially when celebrities report on the radio that they're purchasing in-store.
I agree with Ella, and I actually heard that broadcast. Am I allowed I don't know whether I'm allowed to say what radio station it was, but yes.
You can, yeah, of course.
I think it was a Radio 2 discussion,
right.
Geeking out about vinyl. So I was listening to it.
So vinyl isn't dead.
Vinyl isn't dead, no.
And just a quick question from Bradley. Please can you remind the listeners how many people were polled for these slides? It was more than 1,500 consumers that we polled for these slides. So just to move on, I'd like to now open up our second poll question. I'd encourage you all to take part in this one. We're going on to talk about different means of targeting consumers. And the poll question is, does mobile advertising play an increasing role in your multi-channel marketing strategy? And now on with the next set of findings.
The next question we asked was how consumers prefer to hear from their favourite retailers. How do they prefer to hear about new products, offers and promotions? 43% want to hear from retailers by email. Post TV advertising and direct mail are similarly rated at around 29%. The lowest preferred channels are mobile and social media, although unsurprisingly, they scored top with 18 to 24-year-olds.
Mark, what are your thoughts on those initial findings?
Again, there's no great surprises in there. I mean, the one I particularly wanted to latch on to actually is the 18 to 24 one. We've read a great deal about this, about how the mix and the change of the pattern, and the fact that our children, and I have to tell you, I have a couple of an 18 and 19-year-old, etc. So I have some experience of this, etc. And if I could ever get them off their mobile phones, I might have a better relationship with them. The reality is that their life does seem to revolve around their mobile phones, and clearly it is a fantastic way of communicating with people. I do wonder, though, that actually as they mature, that actually their preferences in terms of how they communicate with people will change. There's this slight expectation, I think, within the sort of marketing world that my kids who are 18 and 19, actually when they're 40, will still be on their mobile phones. I don't think they will.
Well, I've got a 17-year-old, Mark, and I actually worry how he's going to communicate with people because he's so often on the mobile phone.
By text.
By text, I think. And you wonder if they'll be able to spell when they're old as well. And funny enough, someone told me earlier, this was this morning, that you are not marked down in exam questions if your answers or your words represent the way you write texts.
Right.
Which I found absolutely stunning. I mean, if you write you as a you, apparently you're not marked down. I don't know whether that's true or not.
I have to tell you, Andy, you're sounding even older than I am.
But it's very concerning.
I think the reality is how we communicate with I mean, at the centre of this question.
Can we take a point here, Mark? 'Cause 43% want to hear from retailers by email. I mean, I don't know about you, but my inbox is full of a lot of emails that I don't like having there. I unsubscribe, I try to, it's sometimes difficult. However, some that I do get are very useful. But the 43%, I believe it is, was a surprisingly high figure for me.
Yeah, I think you're right because I think people have an expectation of it being relevant. And if you go back to the question beforehand, etc., the vast majority of people think the stuff they get sent is irrelevant. This is a choice, isn't it? I would like to hear from you via email, but actually maybe we're not doing that. Maybe we're doing. I think the other problem actually with email, of course, and I think your point about your inbox is absolutely right. There's not actually any really effective legislation around to actually ensure that it is effectively managed. And it's very difficult. Really, although they say you've got to have the opt-out on every email, it's jolly difficult to get opted out, and it's very difficult to know whether in fact it's the same person that's now sending you a very similar email the next time. So I think and certainly from our discussions at the DMA, we are going to see legislation tightening up on the way that we're able to communicate with people, and I think fundamentally actually that's a good thing.
I think it's important to point out here that on this slide, this is permissioned retailers. So these are consumers' favourite retailers. They're the ones that they've actually actively said, I want to hear from you. So I think
they have a relationship.
They already have a relationship.
Exactly. Which does change.
That's right. Excellent. Andy, we've got a question from the audience here for you. Do you believe the role of SMS and MMS is the same as classic mail or email in terms of the mix? And if not, can you expand on what the difference is?
I think it's important. My concern has always been with SMS and MMS, is it too personal? I think you can target someone very well with a DM campaign and an email campaign. My flip side of that is can you really get your message across in an SMS text? I don't know if you can. I know it's limited to a certain amount of letters or words. I don't know what the limit is. But that's always concerned me. And then there's also legalisation about you should offer an opt-out on an SMS. So where are we with that? Once you've got that involved as well, you're probably left with about 10, 15 characters to actually get your message or offer across.
You've got to have some good copywriters for
You've
that,
really got to have some good copywriters. Is someone really going to respond to that? Where a good DM piece targeted correctly or a good email targeted correctly, I think will give you a lot better results than an SMS text.
Yeah, I think the use of it as a delivery channel. Interestingly, again, I think something we touched on earlier, the ability to target perhaps the 18 to 24-year-old market using location services. So as you know, somebody walks past the shop, it suddenly goes ding ding. Actually, if you come into our store and buy something, we'll give you 10% off right now. Now that becomes a really interesting proposition. And talking about it being timely and pertinent at the time, those sorts of things. I think the idea of actually delivering. I have to say I find it a pain in the backside when I get advertising text, because I think it might be something important and relevant, and actually there is a sort of urgency when your phone goes ding ding, you've got a text, something about it. And actually I find like I've been, just like direct mail used to be, I feel like I've been slightly hoodwinked in terms of doing that, and that doesn't put the consumer at the centre of it. So I think we need to really think, and all of this actually is about, the overriding statement on all of this page we're looking at here is about consumer choice. And it's about, if a consumer makes a choice, then give them the choice and let them make that choice, but we must respect that choice.
Excellent. I've got a few more questions on this. It's sparking a bit of debate. Carlton asks, perhaps so many people say they prefer email simply because it's readily disposable, easy to delete, and because it's relatively anonymous.
Is it easier to read on them? Does anything in the research say about the way we move forward with smartphones and actually technology? Because
No, but I think that's
can
really
we
important.
always focus on that point? That
I think
actually
that is a very important
the
point.
way we are now in the world is we don't have to be sitting in front of a computer to read an email. We can read it on the move, and it's amazing how many people you actually see with a mobile phone on the train now who are actually reading their emails or using their work emails or working.
Sure.
Where we never had that. Especially when I started work, not that I'm that old, but when I started work, it was I didn't even start with a computer at my when I started in the DM trade. But now I think I had my first mobile phone when I was 25. But now they are readily available, and the opportunity to read this material is readily available to you.
Absolutely. Well, that kind of ties in with what Max is saying as well. Given the increasing merging of email-type functionality with tools like BlackBerry Messenger, do you see email becoming mobile with smartphones? And
Well, I think it is, isn't it?
are they not now one and the same is the question?
Yeah.
So our conclusion is they are one and the same. Is that
I think so, and I think actually they're merging more and more close. I think the sort of the distance perhaps initially was between the two things actually has largely evaporated. I think we are all working live, etc. And I think most of the people we live with, we wish we didn't have smartphones. I think probably because we spend too much time on it.
Excellent. This next question, which has come in, is what's stopping retailers using the relevant channels to engage with customer prospects? And I think that's the key from these findings, isn't it? Okay, so some people are being targeted relevantly through the relevant methods, but obviously some people aren't, and what is holding that back?
Well, I think there's a question further on, which I guess we'll come on to, which actually talks about that. Actually, consumers do not want to be communicated from a prospecting point of view by retailers. The vast majority of people don't want to. And I think that's an issue of consumers being discerning. And again, actually, we covered this earlier on. I mean, this issue of you walk down the high street, you have the opportunity to make the choice whether you go into a retailer or not. And I think that it seems to be, and the research seems to bear this out, that actually people, as a result of that, because you've made your choice not to go into the store and have a relationship with them, when they get sold to by a retailer, they think, actually, hey, what? No, I don't want this. You're not respecting my choices. Although, clearly, you're not going to a shop doesn't give the retailer the opportunity to know you don't want to trade with them. But I think that question is really covered in a bit further on in the survey.
Let's put it on ice for a little bit.
Yeah, quite.
Move on to the next finding.
Yeah.
So obviously, to contrast, we asked consumers how they prefer to hear from retailers with regards to new products, offers and promotions if they don't currently buy from them. 2/3 of consumers would prefer not to hear directly from retailers from whom they have not purchased.
There you go.
36% want no contact, and 30% want to hear with above-the-line television advertising. However, 73% of 35 to 44-year-olds would welcome communication. And email is still the preferred digital channel, which I think comes back to the point that was just made. It's easy to delete.
Absolutely. Andy, can I bring you in here? If 2/3 of consumers would prefer not to hear directly from retailers who they haven't purchased from, how do you get new customers?
It's difficult. It's a difficult marketplace. especially this economic climate. I think this comes down to a trust issue and whether you as a consumer, whoever you interact with, you actually trust that brand. And I think it's a hard place for retailers at the moment, but I think you've got to try and gain that trust, whether it be with your existing clients or with your prospects. And whether that is to incentivise them to come to you, and then you look after them well. And I think that's key, and that's something, it's something we do at Nectar. We consumers trust the information we hold in them, that they trust that we will send them relevant information. Otherwise, they will go to competitors and they'll leave the programme. So I think that's a big thing in the retail world at the moment.
Sure.
A couple of things to pick up on that. I mean, I think, and it is an interesting question because it almost feels like a sort of closed door almost. I mean, certainly having done these programmes and done a lot of work on sort of research with consumers, one thing to always remember is that consumers change their minds. We're all consumers, and we change our minds, and different things happen in our lives, and suddenly our set of preferences and the things that we want and require actually change all the time. And this obviously, in terms of good marketing, comes back to the point that Andy was making earlier on about timeliness. It's about reaching people at the right time. And also, just to follow up on that one, I believe, and certainly this research shows very, very clearly, that everyone has a price. The reality is if you incentivise them to come and have contact with you and to deal with them, etc., sufficiently well, and then deliver on what you've said you'll do, etc., then people will come to you. They're saying we don't want it and bits and pieces, and we should try and do everything we can to respect that. But actually, if you then say, well, if you come to us, here's a significant price, everyone has their price, and everybody will go and do something for the right amount of money.
Okay, so we can argue people round on this one. Okay. Andy, do you want to pick up on the age group here? 35 to 44-year-olds would welcome communication. 73% of them said so, and that seems like an anomaly to me.
It's a large percentage, and it would be interesting to see. I don't know whether we'll do this for the next survey. That time period of communication, is that within a month, 3 months, 6 months, 12 months, 18 months? It'd be interesting to see how that fits into this survey. Actually, I think it'd be quite interesting for the next survey. But is that I'm in the age bracket. To a certain point, if I trust a brand, I do welcome communication. Yeah. I'm happy to receive it if I trust a brand because I know they're acting responsibly.
But this is people who don't currently deal with it. So I can't. I agree with you. It does look anomalous. I have to say. The only thing I can think about 35 to 44 is the majority of those people will probably have kids, and maybe actually there's some connection to the fact that people have children, and as a result of that, either they're more receptive, or they've got more things to be interested in, etc. Because it is interesting, isn't it? That's from people who, and it's a big anomaly from the people from other age brackets who quite clearly are saying no, they don't want contact. So something's going on there. I don't know what it is.
Okay, well, we'll investigate that one further. Let me just run down the latest poll results. The question we asked was, does mobile advertising play an increasing role in your multi-channel marketing strategy? Now, almost 60% of people said yes, so obviously a big growth channel. 23.5 said no, 17.6 said they don't know. So excuse my rounding up and down of figures there slightly, but 60% saying yes. So Andy, it's a growth area.
Especially with apps, I think that's the key thing at the moment, isn't it? How whatever platform you're on, I won't mention any retailers' names, but that's a big thing. We've invested in that market in the last couple of years, and it's proven a success for us.
Yes, I think the question was simply broad. It was, are you using it? I suppose the follow-up is how are you using it?
Yeah,
indeed.
That's absolutely that's the key to it, isn't it? If it
was a yes/no answer, we would answer that one as well.
Quite exactly. I think the issue really is. Certainly one of the things that I'm very excited about mobile actually is using mobile as a response mechanism. It's a fantastic response mechanism because of the immediacy and the ability to do that. So if you're doing those sorts of things, then actually, yes, I can see that. I agree with Andy's point, absolutely. As an advertising medium, I think that's quite a difficult one.
Mind you, there were some recent figures that said, from the British Retail Consortium, that said that retail searches using smartphones have exploded by 181%.
Yeah, well,
181%.
yeah. Well, that's people, surfing the web via a mobile phone. So, is that internet communication or is that mobile? I mean, that's an interesting one, isn't it? Where do you draw the line? And at the moment, the demarcation lines are actually quite grey at the moment, aren't they? They're quite soft, and then they're all sort of merging into one, really. I think it's all about digital communications per se.
Sure thing. Excellent. So we're going to move on to talk about some more really interesting topics. So before that, I would like to kick off another poll. And the question is, do you think the growing use of promotions and incentives is good or bad for retail brands? I think that's an interesting one. And we'll move on now to the next findings.
So we asked consumers, what is most and least likely to motivate you to buy? And the results were quite striking. A good promotion or incentive is just as likely to motivate you to purchase as a recommendation. 25 to 34-year-olds earning between £40,000 and £50,000 are most susceptible to promotions. 55 and over are more interested in friends' recommendations. Men are more motivated by comments on web forums, TV ads and reviews.
Does that mean more gullible, really?
Do we watch too much TV?
More geeky, maybe. Yeah. And promotions are most successful with food and clothing products.
Excellent. So it would seem that if you get an attractive promotion or incentive recommended by your friend, that's absolutely the most effective way. Mark, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, I suppose, the old idea of sales promotion, the bell is still ringing loud and clear, isn't it? The reality is that, if we give you something, I wonder again whether actually, had we conducted this survey maybe a year or two ago, etc. I mean, clearly, the current financial climate, and I think everybody's wallets are being slightly more tightly squeezed, etc. I wonder whether that part of the findings are actually as part and parcel of people thinking, I need to be more sensible and more frugal in the way that I do it, and if I can get a good deal from a brand that I trust and I know, then absolutely it will drive me and it will motivate me more. In a way, it's a rather sort of sad indictment of our society, really, etc. It's almost as like, if I go and get that, what are you going to give me, rather than sort of going out and making a discerned choice in terms of where we do. I'm very confused about the men thing, but I suspect it's probably true. I think we should get Andy to talk about successful food and clothing products, because that's where you are.
But I'm interested enough, though. As I say, we were talking about this earlier. I think we are susceptible to a good bargain. I mean, who doesn't like a good bargain? I mean, when you get something half price or get money off it, or you can use points to buy something, you don't have to pay with your credit card. Great. I mean, everybody loves that. And just looking at the 25 to 34-year-olds earning between 40 and 50,000, that's a pretty good wage for a 25 to 34-year-old. I think it's interesting. If you look at that, it's a pretty good wage. Have they got more money? It wasn't my day, but have they got more money to burn? It's an interesting thing. I think we should add it into the next survey, but look at that. There doesn't seem to be a lot of free cash around, no. but that group who are earning that much money are doing pretty well. Yes. They're doing pretty well. Yeah. And I, as I say, I agree with the 55 and over. I think more interested in friends' recommendations. I think at that age you have a group of friends, and if they suggest something, then you probably will trust that brand, and I think that can be passed along. Men watching TV. I think we're watching too much TV, aren't we?
It's a sad admission, yes. It really.
What about to drill into it a bit further, Mark? So, look, for example, comments on a web forum are more influential than a television advert. Now, those comments can come from anyone, can't they?
Well, they can do, but I don't know about everybody else listening to this, but I think the way that we buy things these days actually has changed, and I would really go along with that. And actually, interestingly, very boring example, but actually I've just because our dishwasher broke, I just bought a new dishwasher. So where do you start? The best dishwasher to buy into Google. And the interesting thing is, of course, actually you go for the reviews. You start to look at the reviews and you take people's word at it. And I guess, I have to say, I'm a huge fan of TripAdvisor and the principle of a raft of people and actually providing you with an aggregated result which says actually this is 4-star or this is 2-star actually is very good. And this is really the way marketing has changed now in terms of where, and it doesn't matter who you are or what you are. At the end of the day, you want to make a discerned and and the right choice. And actually, if you have, and I think the issue is that if you have an aggregated result, that's the key point. You can't take one person's recommendation, but I think if you have an aggregated result across the board, then actually you've got a pretty good estimate of whether in fact you're buying a decent product or a fairly dodgy product, whatever it happens to be. So I think yes, we do that. I would agree, though, that I think women are less likely to do that because I think they won't be told anything, will they? No, I didn't mean that. No.
Just to butt in here as the woman on the panel. Actually, we have just got a new car, a second-hand car, but I actually looked at all the reviews on the Mumsnet site to help me buy my car because it was for bigger families. I'm having my third child.
And I retract
So I did use my forum to inform myself. Of course, my husband did the main research on the Mercedes Club, reviews. But yes, I do think women are.
I think the serious message is the way that we buy these days has changed. Because the opportunity to be able to get a mass opinion, actually, which wasn't available to us long ago, is
it's a lot easier.
So why wouldn't you exploit it? Particularly if you're spending, hundreds, you're making a larger purchase, then absolutely the ability to tap into that sort of piece of information is very, very useful.
I'd like to also point out, as a journalist, that reviews and mentions in magazines are very influential indeed.
Same thing, same sort of thing. It doesn't all have to be on the internet.
Well, actually, that also brings me on to another question. Just saying it, I've noticed that a lot of retailers are starting to bring out some really fantastic magazines that are sort of part catalogue, but ASOS have a great magazine, Editions, the
Branded
John Lewis.
content is the only thing, isn't it? Absolutely.
It looks good, it feels good, you want to read it.
Yeah, I think you're right there. Rather than reading a magazine and only part of it you want to read, you actually find a magazine or a correspondence that you want to read from start to finish. And I think it's right and almost fits into this medium if it's a good advertising.
Sure.
Good advertising medium.
Well, it's in our days, because I started on the publishing side of the world as well, but we used to call it contract publishing in our days, where you had organisations who were putting out their own magazines, and what it does, of course, it goes into the CRM part of the mix, really, and now you're actually tailoring content, and this sort of thing obviously is happening on the internet a lot of the time at the moment, but actually a physical magazine, and it comes all the way back, doesn't it, to the idea of retailers, and when you're buying from a bricks and mortar building, this innate desire to see, touch, and feel, and I think actually magazines, and certainly CRM-based magazines, giving relevant content in a timely fashion to your audience. What a brilliant way of going right now. And we're seeing a huge flux of it right now in terms of the market.
Absolutely. Question from Tom here. Is there a problem with online reviews that they can drive negative press and affect consumer demand because a minority of customers with bad reviews can influence the majority of the consumer market? This is a TripAdvisor thing, isn't it?
Yeah.
If there are 3 reviews and 2 are bad,
but I did use the word aggregated. I agree.
Yeah.
You've got to balance it out. I agree, and actually there's some devilish stuff that people go on and Western, etc., and write terrible stuff, and there has to be a way of trying to moderate that content in some way or another. And I'm not sure that TripAdvisor have quite got that right. I agree with the point. It's a dangerous. That's the bad side that counters the good bit.
Yeah, it's how you manage your expectations, I think, on what you read. Yeah. You have to read some stuff with a pinch of salt, don't you?
Yes.
And on the flip side, I think, yeah, it can be bad, but as you say, as long as you manage your expectations and you read up sensibly and don't let your mind run away with you, then I can't see.
I have to say as well, some of the bad reviews on TripAdvisor are hysterical. They are really worth reading. Stories of men leaping around and headbutting walls and things.
Someone's probably written a novel or a non-fiction about it, have they? I imagine so.
Almost certainly.
If not, I might retire and do that myself. Yeah.
Right, exactly.
Right, quickly back to our poll question. So what we asked was, do you think the growing use of promotional incentives is good or bad for retail brands? Now, 60% said good, 35% said bad, 5% said they don't know.
Well, this is a very interesting question. Again, something which we covered briefly at lunchtime. I raised this story. You're going to have to help me out with the name of the programme, which is the seaside thing.
Jersey Shore.
The Jersey Shore story, again, with the Abercrombie and Fitch. Yeah, this very interesting thing, and actually we were talking about Mulberry before. Burberry, sorry, who got before, whose brand went all the wrong way, etc. And this is an interesting one, is that obviously, is it possibly that a promotion, and the fact that 35% have said they think it's bad, is that because potentially it slightly demeans the brand that they've actually built? Is it not just about selling more, which could be the short-termist view? And I thought Abercrombie and Fitch's move was a very interesting one, to pay this star to stop wearing the clothes that he was wearing
It was
in
a
his TV
magnificent
program.
PR stunt, wasn't it?
Well, but I mean, it may have been a PR stunt, but actually, was his wearing actually taking it down the Burberry route, and was it going to fundamentally undermine their brand?
Or on the flip side, was it a clever bit of marketing?
Well, it was brilliant if that was the case.
You know,
and the rest
yeah.
of the text.
But
I think
I'm
like
actually
you say,
surprised,
yes.
Andy. I'm actually surprised that more people didn't think that price promotions and promotional incentives is bad for retailers, because I think brands need to have a certain equity and a certain price point. Is that what you think of things?
Yeah, surprising. I think that drives you to potentially drives you to a product or a retailer. So I'm surprised by those. Slightly surprised by those results.
You
Really.
think that 35% saying it's bad is too high, do you?
Yeah.
Do you think more people would have said, no, have an incentive?
I can't. As I say, I think a good incentive drives you to that brand.
Do you think it's about the partners, though, that you work with, perhaps, as well? If you're working with the right people...
Well, in your case.
Yeah, I mean, in our case, it's there's a lot of partners and brands, so it has to be managed very carefully. Whether that's, I haven't had much experience with a single brand, so I wouldn't like to comment on that. But as I say, we manage it. We saying earlier, we have to manage expectations across the brands, and it has to be done in a very sensitive manner.
Excellent.
I mean, it does seem to be clear that there's a brand integrity issue there with promotions, isn't there? Isn't that what I presume that's why we're thinking that 35% have said no, we wouldn't use incentives.
I believe so as well, and I'd like to bring in a comment from Ella here, who says, the overall customer journey is so important when it comes to sales promotions. Research suggests that so much cash is going to waste due to the disconnect between online and offline platforms, leading to a confusing and inconsistent sales journey. That's interesting. Are we still disconnected in terms of offline and online?
I think we are. I think actually we're a lot of us are competing for the same airtime. Yeah. I think the reality is that, and I think the smart brands actually have got that one sussed now. I think they are beginning to make sure that, because actually the future of marketing is all about multi-channel.
Yes.
It's about how we get all these channels to actually work more effectively with each other. Is it I mean, one of the immediate examples is the way that the motoring company, the car companies use email to, particularly when it's connected through into nice sort of trendy movies and bits and pieces, to drive traffic into their local retailers. Those are the sort of things. So now what they're doing is they're using a digital channel to take somebody to create store traffic to then create sales. And for me, that's the future of it across DM as a whole, but certainly in terms of retail, it's about using the channels that are available to you in the most appropriate fashion, in the most appropriate way, which ultimately, collectively, delivers best ROI. So it's about this combination, and we talk about integrated marketing and through-the-line marketing, and nobody's quite got it yet. And I think you're right. A lot of the brands are fighting for airspace in terms of and share a voice from a channel point of view, but actually, there are some brands that are well ahead of the game, and again, actually going forward on this research, it shows which ones are ahead of the game and why, and ultimately they're the ones that are also ultimately delivering really good customer service.
Excellent. And just a final comment we've got here on the question on the results of our poll, which we asked, do you think the growing use of promotional incentives is good or bad for retail brands? Mihail comes in with an interesting point, which he says the 65% are acting as consumers. The 60% are acting as consumers, while the 35% are acting as marketers, which means
but we
saying,
are all consumers, aren't we? But it's a good point. It's a very good point.
Indeed. Right, shall we move on?
Yes, indeed. The next question we asked was, who do you most and least trust with your personal data? And the results were that men trust retailers more than women. Bricks and mortar retailers enjoy biggest trust scores, with high street chains and supermarkets leading the way. Online and catalogue retailers are least trusted, with the exception of the more digitally savvy 18 to 24-year-olds.
Excellent. Thanks, Elise. So, Andy, what do you think about that? Bricks and mortar retailers enjoy the biggest trust scores, especially supermarkets.
I'm very positive about that. as you know,
Is that to do with your partners?
Yeah, it's to do with our partners. That's a really positive stat, and I like that stat. But I think again, as you say, that the key word in it is trust, and I think once you've given a brand or a company your details, it's having that trust. I mean, I think as probably as a nation, we've become a lot more data savvy, especially probably in the last 4 or 5 years, of actually, who has got our personal information. And I think it's so widely available that you hear about these mass data losses and security issues that all these companies are having. I think we've all had to get a lot smarter, not just in my industry, in many industries that hold personal data, and that personal data is the crown jewels of the business, really. What I do find interesting is men trust retailers more than women. That's funny stat that I've never really thought about that. I've never sat down and thought about that. But it's
women spend more time in shops than men do.
I would have thought men were more suspicious. It's just.
I think. I just sort of wanted to raise the whole thing around the argument, even away from the retail side, but around the whole issue of data trust, because there's a real core issue here as a marketing industry. And, we can argue till the cows come home about, is everything centric around data? I would clearly argue that, but there are alternative views, etc. But the whole issue of data trust actually is fundamental to all of our futures, because unless we can get consumers to trust us and thereby to have proper relationships where we're data sharing and getting them working with us in order to do that, then we have a problem. And we've done many of these things in different sectors, but over the years an awful lot of research. And I have to tell you that the biggest threat to the marketing industry above anything is the idea of an individual having their identity stolen. And they will, you ask, and we've done surveys on this, you ask any individual, would you rather have A, B, C, D or E, or alternatively have your identity stolen, etc. The identity stolen one is the one that's always top of the pile. They will do anything to protect their identity. And when you have a relationship with a consumer of any sort or another, etc., and you ask them to give you their data, whether it's because you need to deliver the thing that you're buying online or whatever it happens to be, or you want to have a record and so and so, the data savviness that we were talking about earlier on is around that. And there's a lot of misconceptions with the consumers in terms of how they feel about giving you their data. But if you mishandle it and you mistreat it, the trust is not just gone temporarily, it is gone forever. You will never, ever get them back. So the way that companies and organisations are having to, remain compliant in terms of looking after data, but also the way in which you effectively manage that private information of that individual is crucial and is actually second to none in terms of a priority in terms of these organisations. And
there have been some big brands recently that
absolutely
have lost personal data.
Yeah.
And I think, respect for those companies is...
The Sony PlayStation example is obviously a big one. What reassurances can companies who rely on data like that give consumers, Andy? What do you think?
As I say, trust is the first key. And it goes back literally through this whole survey of how that data is treated once you give it to a company. That you're not bombarded with you're not bombarded with things that you don't want to receive. As I've always said, if you give someone your personal details, you want them to act responsibly. And as soon as they don't start acting responsibility, it affects the brand. It has a big effect on brand awareness. I mean, what I also found quite interesting here was the bigger, well-known brands that actually people feel more secure with than the smaller brands.
So companies with brand equity are perhaps trusted more.
So do they look at those companies and say, well, a bigger brand, they'll spend more time protecting their data, more effort, more money. So that would be interesting to see if we could find that out as well in future surveys.
There was a survey that was conducted recently by the DMA where we were trying to find out about people's view in terms of giving up data and trying to get to do that, etc. And there were some examples, and as we well know, some organisations, the sort of opt-out clauses, they'll put in clause 38 subsection B, so you can barely find it. And actually, the amount of data those organisations got was actually quite small. The ones that were most successful in collating data were the ones that were absolutely upfront and said, look, we may use this, we want your permission, please tell us that. We might do this with it, please tell us whether we can. And so the ones that are overt and open about their possible intent in terms of using the data are much more successful in actually gathering data. And consumers feel more confident because they think you're being up front with them and telling them the truth. Andy, of course, is absolutely right. If you don't then deliver on that, you're gone. That's it. You're finished, and so and so. So delivery of the promise is absolutely crucial.
Do you think, just finally on this point, do you think brands can make it a bit easier for people to opt in and out of things and give their personal data and just make things a bit clearer?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's been confusion in the marketplace over years. I mean, it's been opt-in, it's been opt-out, it's flipped back and forward. I think I agree with Mark's point that as long as you make it clear to a consumer, one, what's happening to their data, and two, can they opt out at any given point? And it's something we make very, very clear to a collector that, you know, we won't send you irrelevant information. You opt in, you can opt out at any given point. I mean, a number of emails I've received where it's very, very hard to even find an unsubscribe link, which you know, you go through several pages of several websites to get an unsubscribe, and you think you've unsubscribed, and then within a day you get another email. Right. I mean, and as Mark was saying, you know, that has a massive impact on the brand.
Well, bear in mind we're talking trust here. I mean, what you were just describing in terms of the inability to opt out doesn't actually sound like you're instilling trust in somebody. Just being upfront and saying, may we do this, and the rest of it, etc. And actually, Andy's absolutely right. One of the other things that is crucial in this is saying to somebody, we'll do this for as long as you're happy for us to do it, and if you want to tell us to stop, we'll stop, and then deliver on that.
Excellent. Well, let's move on to our final findings here, Elise.
Okay, so we asked consumers who offers you the best customer buying experience. John Lewis and Amazon offer the best buying experience overall. Amazon is the top UK retail brand, both in terms of penetration and customer experience. Smaller retailers also score highly, including Bose, Hotel Chocolat and Firebox, beating many top high street brands. Tesco was the most popular retailer in terms of customers, but the 7th most popular for customer experience.
Well, that's really interesting for me. We're actually naming brands here, seeing how good they are, ranking them. John Lewis top.
Well, to be clear, Andy, we're not naming them, consumers are.
This is true.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on that, Mark?
Well, I think, I mean, the interesting thing was, obviously, you know, of course, one would expect Tesco's to be really absolutely crucial in terms of this. And I think that there's and when you look at the sort of market penetration, Tesco's, of course, is way ahead, but a very close behind is Amazon. And then, if I remember rightly, there's a big leap down to the other brands. What this clearly shows is that a combination of market penetration and usage and great customer service is what's really making this. Now, what does John Lewis do to make people feel that their data is being looked after, that they're having a great retail experience? My perception of it, and this is only anecdotal from my point of view, but I think that is that actually there seems to be a completely joined up, top to bottom strategy in terms of how customers will be treated. I always feel when I'm dealing with John Lewis that as a customer, I'm at the centre of it. And I think that it is possible that of some of the other brands that are included here, that would not be the case in terms of how you do that.
I think I'd like to add as well is usability of these sites as well. And I especially think John Lewis and Amazon have almost got it quite seamless. So you can go there, you can find what you're looking for straight away. You haven't got to trawl through pages, and I think to me that appeals as a consumer. That if you want something, and especially Amazon. I mean, Amazon's so well known as a brand, and once again, I know I keep harping back to trust, but you trust when you order something from Amazon, you know you're going to get it. You can track it at any given point. You know when you're going to get it. You're told when you're going to get it. If you're not going to get it, you're told when you know it's going to be late or delivery's going to be late. So it's I wasn't surprised by these stats. To be honest with you, it's sort of it's true to life.
The John Lewis partnership's been around for a hell of a long time. Do you think other brands aren't quite learning from them over that time? I mean, it's quite a gap, isn't it? 37%.
It's a big jump down.
And then down to Amazon, 27%. Laura Ashley, 21%. Hotel Chocolat, 20%.
Yeah, I think I'm not sure. I mean, you know, I mean, Amazon of course hasn't. I mean, and it's only been making money for the last 3 or 4 years, and so. But I do think that Amazon is a bit of a. it's a bit of the exception to the rule here. I mean, it obviously started off as a book retailer and did it that way, and then moved into music. Now, actually, interestingly, I was going to go buy my dishwasher. What comes up? But actually, you can buy your dishwashers from Amazon now. I think you can buy anything from Amazon now. It's quite extraordinary. So I guess that deals with the issue of market penetration. It certainly seems to market the penetration.
And just so you know, in the actual full research report, there is, we did ask the consumers which retailers they had purchased from in the last 12 months. And Tesco were the most. Tesco, followed by Amazon, had the most purchases. And it's quite interesting to see that Tesco then, in terms of buying experience, come further down the line. So it doesn't always measure up.
Well, the dynamic is quite clear that Tesco's are not doing the customer service job that
Amazon.
The Amazon and John Lewis.
Yeah.
3 quick things to finish before we wrap up. On a personal level, Andy, what's your favourite shopping experience?
Favourite shopping experience? Put me on the spot there, to be honest with you.
I'll give you
Well, step in first.
I'll give you my I think about it. Now,
Favourite shopping
every
experience.
golf pro in the country is going to be going yeehaw. Actually, going into my local golf professional shop, which is quite interesting at the golf, because I tell you why, because they know me, they know what my requirements are and everything else, etc. And, you get that one-on-one, etc. So rather than wandering around a huge retail store, etc., it's that feeling of dealing with somebody who knows what one's needs are and what your capabilities are and all those sort of things. So maybe actually that's sort of what John Lewis are doing, or maybe what Amazon are doing, because of the way they manipulate the data. So that for me is where it works.
And funny enough, I've, without putting me on the spot, I've recently moved into a new house and we've got an apple tree. And I've got lots of apples dropping on the grass, and I have literally been to Amazon very recently and bought a cider making machine. and to me, that was an enjoyable experience, because I'm going to set it up in my shed at the end of the garden and grow this crop of cider. Hopefully, so that as I say, even though Amazon are there, that
sounds
probably
idyllic,
wasn't-
Andy. I like that.
that was enjoyable for me, because I was actually buying something for.
Well, next year when
for
we do
me.
this, he'll bring some of his cider.
Elise, how about you?
Why not make it?
For online, I think it has to be ASOS. For fashion retail, I love buying clothes there now and accessories. And certainly as a store experience, John Lewis Home and Waitrose. If I can go to Waitrose and afford it, I will go and do my shopping there. The nice wide aisles.
Great stuff. And I think Sandra brings up a good point. She says they also have a great experience because they have a seamless returns policy, which for anyone who's bought clothes the wrong size or anything wrong, that's
great.
hugely important, isn't it?
Very.
Excellent. Right, I think we'll wrap up now. Have we got some conclusions, gentlemen? What do you think the most important findings were from today's report?
For me, important findings for me really in the DM trade, and Mark will probably agree, is this concerning matter of untargeted mail that still seems to be hitting the marketplace. I mean, I think we've almost got away, or we did it some years ago, got away of junk mail, but it really does concern me that especially in this economic climate, that people aren't being, or brands or retailers aren't being a little bit more sensible with their money. Because I just think if you can learn from your experiences and target and incentivise correctly, that it will do so much more for the brand and the retailer.
I do echo that. I think that's absolutely right. I think fundamentally, from a retail perspective, the reality is the world is throwing an awful lot of stuff at everybody at the moment in terms of being a consumer, and therefore the retail sector is under onslaught at the moment in terms of the opportunities that are there. I think the reality is the research shows that actually if one can really have a joined up one-to-one process where the consumer is at the centre of it, then actually the opportunities abound, albeit in a very difficult marketplace. I think fundamentally, if we get ourselves into a point where companies are putting everything together, and many of them are, and some of the retailers we all know are doing extremely well out there, but you know what? It's because they're doing things differently. Those that sit on their hands and really don't do anything are going to be the ones that will suffer.
Elise, any final thoughts?
I just think that as marketers, we really have to work hard to help drive, multi-channel as well as we can.
I think it's a really insightful report. And in answer to Carlton's question, how can we get a full version of the report? The answer is to email the Red Group, our partners on Brand Republic. If you email marketing@redgroupplc.com, that's marketing@redgroupplc.com. And it just leaves for me to wrap this up now. I'd like to thank you all very much indeed for joining us. Mark, Andy and Elise, thank you very much for giving up your time and expertise. It's much appreciated. And that wraps up this Brand Republic webcast. Thank you very much indeed.